Hello, is my recording working? Yes, I believe so. The recording is in progress. And I am observing the computer recording and observing you watching. Are you observing yourselves or are you observing me? Doesn't matter. What are you doing? Observing, seeing eye to eye. So Gurdjieff discussed a lot about self-observation. I used to get it mixed up with self-remembering. I still do a bit, which is which. So I thought I'll do a show on self-observing. So I got together some quotes and I'm going to start with a nice long one from Views from the Real World. Self-observation is very difficult. The more you try, the more you will see this. At present, you should practice it not for results, but to understand that you cannot observe yourselves. Objectively, you cannot see yourselves for a single minute because it is a difficult function. I mean, a different function. Sorry, I read that wrong. See, I'm observing the book and I can't even read that properly because it is a different function, the function of the master. And we are not master of ourselves, which is why we are finding it difficult to self-observe ourselves. All our different eyes keep popping up and really it's just a different eye pretending to observe. We need to gather all them eyes together, bring up deputy steward, and then let the master come through at some point. But at the moment, it's difficult. So continuing. If it seems to you that you can observe yourself for 5 minutes, this is wrong. If it is for 1 minute or 20 minutes, this is equally wrong. If you simply realize that you cannot, it will be right. To come to it is your aim. To achieve this aim, you must try and try. When you try, the result will not be, in the true sense, self-observation. But trying will strengthen your attention. You will learn to concentrate better. All this will be useful later. Only then can one begin to remember oneself. If you work conscientiously, you will remember yourself not more but less because self-remembering requires many things. It is not so easy. It costs a great deal. The exercise of self-observation is sufficient for several years. Do not attempt anything else. If you work conscientiously, you will see what you need. At present, you have but one attention, either in the body or the feeling. So we're trying again to be conscientious when we're doing the work, trying to harmonize our centers so we can reach up to higher center, the two highest centers. And then maybe we'll be able to observe ourselves. But what are we doing when we're observing ourselves? We're self-remembering. I did a show last time, and that was again telling you how you need all your centers working, but you know, every center's trying to deceive the other center, or one center's trying to do better than the other center, or only one center's working, or maybe your feeling center's not feeling, but instead trying to think. You've got to remember in each center, there's a feeling, thinking, the moving version of itself. So the emotional center's got a emotional thinking center, an emotional feeling center, an emotional moving center. Thinking center's got a thinking emotional center, a thinking center, and a thinking moving center, and so on. Blah, blah, blah. All these centers. So I was going to go to, I'll do some life is real only then when I am. The most important work for a man who has already cognized with his reason his real significance, the exaggerated importance given to his individuality, which represents almost a complete nullity, is to acquire the ableness to direct for a definite time all his possibilities and all his strength only for the purpose of constating as many as possible of the physical as well as the psychic abnormal facts proceeding in his various functionings. That is, to exercise self-observation. So we have to work out that we're nothing. Did a show on that as well, but I'm sure you've been finding that out. We're all nullities. Deep down, there is an I trying to come up, our essence trying to come through to show that even though we're nothing, we can be something. So self-observation, sorry, I had to stop then because the dog wants to go out. Self-observation, the summarized elucidation of this information, the knowledge of which is indeed quite indispensable at the beginning for everyone who is striving to learn the truth. But if it becomes the center of gravity for the mentation of man, will unfailingly lead to just the result which, to my great regret, I observe now. And this is when he was talking to all the people at Araji's groups, that they weren't observing themselves rightly, they were observing themselves in a wrong way. And, you know, I recommend Life is Real, Only Then When I Am, to read how the groups were struggling with the work. And as we all do, we all struggle. This is where we have to put the effort in and be conscientious, but we can also be doing it the wrong way. One of the eyes might be trying to deceive us and say, no, you're doing it right, when we're not. How do we know if we're self-observing in the right way or not, in the correct way? The only suggestion I have really is to go and read the Gurdjieff writings and the Ouspensky writings, because it's all written in those, how to do it. And really, this is all coming down to the old adage of know thyself. If we can know ourselves and be aware of which eye is doing what, when, where, we're observing why that eye is acting like that, why that eye is doing that. And when another eye comes in and starts being this way, you know, there's different versions of ourselves. As I said before, we've got our work version. When you go to work, you're one eye. When you're with your family, you're a different eye. When you're with your friends, you're another eye. When you're with your partner, you're a different eye. You know, these are all different eyes of ourselves. And we want to try and observe them different eyes acting out their roles as we do. It's all an act. Well, actually, most of them eyes don't act at all. They react. They react to the situation. We want to develop ourselves so that if we're awake, we act in hopefully a conscientious and right way. So this is All and Everything, page 1209. The very best object of study is he himself with his own mechanicality, and to study this practically and to understand it sensibly with all one's being and not psychopathically, which people do. People start analysing their self-observations to the point of, you know, Freud will be rolling in his grave and Carl Jung will be like, you're only thinking or analysing things in a not very productive way. That is, if only one part of one's entire presence is possible only as a result of correctly conducted self-observation. And that's what we're trying to get, correctly conducted self-observation. A man in the first place must decide once and for all that he will be sincere with himself unconditionally, will shut his eyes to nothing, shun no results, be afraid of no inferences. Thanks to correctly conducted self-observation, a man will, from the first days, clearly grasp and indubitably establish his complete powerlessness and helplessness in the face of literally everything around him. Everything is out of our control. We want to control it, but it isn't. We can't. It's out of our control. So we have to observe how we react or act in the situation, any situation that's going on, you know, in your life, in the world, in the universe, in how other people's situations are affecting you. But some good news in Views from the Real World again. We must strive for freedom if we strive for self-knowledge. The task of self-knowledge and of further development is of such importance and seriousness. It demands such intensity of effort that to attempt it any old way, and amongst other things, is impossible. The person who undertakes this task must put it first in his life, which is not so long that he can afford to squander it on trifles. As Gurdjieff says, you know, this is our chance to do this in this lifetime. Okay, we might believe we can't come back in another lifetime and again and again and again, or recurrence, whatever you believe. do you want to get caught up in that cycle? We want to do it now. There might not be another time. You might come back in another life and never hear of this work or any kind of work of this kind, and don't develop yourself at all, where you've got the opportunity now. Now is the time. And I myself think humanity is on a turning point of evolution. As Gurdjieff says, what's that quote? The man only evolves with his consciousness and his conscience. And if we're not doing that, then we're not going to evolve, and humanity is going to go downhill. This is our chance to do it now. We had the work before us to do it. And he goes on to say, first of all, everyone should understand his own mechanicalness. This understanding can come only as a result of a rightly formulated self-observation. A man must make the decision that he will be absolutely sincere with himself. Very much courage is required to accept sincerely the results and conclusions. And it is difficult being sincere with yourself, but if you do start doing it, after a while, you start realizing, your other centers will start realizing this is for the benefit for yourself to develop and to go forward. Being sincere with yourself, then you start becoming sincere with everything else that's going on in your life. But it is harsh looking at yourself and cringing. I know Gurdjieff says somewhere about how, if people really knew what they were like, they would commit suicide. But we're getting past that point. We're not going to, at first, it's going to be hard on yourselves. But there's a developing stage to all this, that you suddenly realize that wasn't me, that was it. That was a different I doing that, and you're trying to bring your real I out that will do the, excuse me, the real work. The I that is the essence, the master, will come through and be the real you. Right, so very much courage is required to accept sincerely the results and conclusions. They upset a man's whole line of thinking and deprive him of his most pleasant and dearest illusions. He sees his whole total impotence in the face of literally everything that surrounds him. He sees how his character, tastes, and habits, the personality, are formed. And it is like what he says there, you do suddenly think, oh, cringe at myself. But as I was just saying, we go to a different I. Hopefully the master comes through that shows us that it's not us, it's it. And that part of us is changing so that we become the real whole person, the harmonious person that we're supposed to be. Memory, attention, observation is nothing more than an observation of one center by another. How was I going to go with this? Oh, yes. In the beginning of the work, one exercise is very useful, for it helps one to see oneself, to collect material. This exercise is entering into the position of another. This should be undertaken as a task. We are all alike. Just as I change, so does another. Remember, everybody else is being all their different eyes at different times. You don't see all the different eyes of that person. Your workmates, you're seeing the work version of themselves. When you go out with them in the evening for the first time, you suddenly see a totally different version of them, because they've put on their different hat, their different version of their eye. The different eyes come through. If you realize this and remember it, if you think and do your task at the right time, you'll see many new things in yourself and your surroundings, things you have not seen before. This is the first step. The second step is practicing concentration. Through this exercise, you can achieve another thing. Self-observation is very difficult, but it can give much material. If you remember how you manifest yourself, how you react, how you feel, what you want, you will learn many things. Sometimes you may distinguish at once what is thought, what is feeling, what is body. And that's part of what we're trying to work out, isn't it? What's doing this? Is it our thinking? Is it our body? Is it our emotions coming through? Are they acting in the right place? Are they doing the right thing? Is it the right time for them? Or should I be thinking instead of feeling? All that kind of thing. I was saying before about the 3 centers in each center. You want to start becoming aware of which centers thinking, and if it's thinking in the right way, you know, it's observation. But as Ouspensky reminds us in Search of the Miraculous, the starting point is that man does not know himself, that he is not, that is, he is not what he can and what he should be. And he goes on to say, it is possible to stop being a machine, but for that it is necessary first of all to know the machine. And that's what this self-observation is all about. We're trying to get to know our machine and recognize what it's doing, why it's doing it, and when it's doing it, and blah, 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 blah. He must first of all realize that he is in prison. We're breaking free. We're prison breakers. Self-observation, especially at the beginning, must on no account become analysis or attempts at analysis. Attempts to find answers to the questions on what does it depend, why does it happen, but registering, simply recording in one's mind what is observed at the moment. So you're observing, oh, this eye's come out today and doing whatever it's doing, and then, you know, half hour later you've got to suddenly realize, oh no, it's a different eye now. So you're observing yourself. You know, we are the observers observing our eyes doing these different things. Like at the moment, I'm supposed to be observing that I am here trying to put forward what Gurdjieff and Ouspensky were saying about self-observation. You're hopefully sitting there observing yourself, observing this video, and not thinking about what you're having for tea later or whatever. Ouspensky says, self-observation, especially at the beginning. Oh, I've done that one. Oh, no, I haven't. Or have I? Analysis will only become possible much later when a man knows all the functions of his machine and all the laws which govern it. So I wasn't watching the functions of my machine then and trying to reread a paragraph I'd already done. The machine, like the computers that we work with and the AI that's rising, thinks it knows better, but it doesn't. You know, it's just working mechanically and following its laws. Ouspensky goes on to say, before it is possible to analyze even the most elementary phenomena, a man must accumulate a sufficient quantity of material by means of recording. Recording, that is, the result of a direct observation of what is taking place at a given moment, is the most important material in the work of self-study. In the given moment, in the now, even though the now is now gone. But at that time, when I was looking at myself in that now, if we're doing that self-observation in the now and practice it, it will become hopefully natural, the norm. But he reminds us that in order really to observe oneself, one must first of all remember oneself. So please see my show about self-remembering. They kind of go together. So Ouspensky writes, having fixed in his own mind the difference between the intellectual, the emotional, and the moving functions, a man must, as he observes himself, immediately refer his impressions to this or that category. In order to observe and study habits, one must try to struggle against them. So we're observing ourselves, putting the results we obtain into categories. It's like putting them into boxes, but then I don't believe in boxes. We need to break free of the boxes, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be free. But to get to that kind of stage, we need to practice these kinds of exercises. And Ouspensky reminds us, self-observation must from the first be accompanied by the struggle against the expression of unpleasant emotions. Self-observation brings man to the realization of the necessity for self-change. Because we don't want our old eyes carrying on. We're doing this work to change to become the real I. not the new I, the real I, the I that's coming through, that's the master. And Ouspensky says, a man must learn to take mental photographs of himself at different moments of his life, photographs of the whole as he saw it. Instead of the man he had supposed himself to be, he will see quite another man. It's painful. He knows that there is a great deal that is unreal, invented, and artificial in this other man. You must learn to divide the real from the invented, and to begin self-observation and self-study. It is necessary to divide oneself. Man must realize that he indeed consists of two men, which is the man he calls I. The other is the real I, which appears in his life only for a very short moment, and which can become firm and permanent only after a very lengthy period of work. So that I, that the master can come through and be permanent. You know, this is what, you know, I think the masters were doing, that managed to achieve this kind of thing. They were being their real I. I'd like to believe that's what Gurdjieff was. I never met him, obviously, love to. But he'd got to the point where he's being his real I all the time. And I'm going to be a bit critical of a show I did earlier the other week with Tony Blake, when he says we can't do this all the time. I believe we can. And Gurdjieff and Ouspensky are telling us we can. We can have to work on ourselves to the point so that it breaks through and it becomes permanent. And Ouspensky reminds us that people do not understand that sincerity must be learned. Self-observation brings a man to the realization of the fact that he does not remember himself. Especially strongly did I feel that in spite of every effort, I was unable to remember myself for any length of time. I felt without any doubt the deep sleep in which I was immersed. And when we start realizing this deep sleep that we're immersed in, that's when we want to start pulling ourselves out of it and break free of that prism. You know, that's when we should be really doing our self-observations and our self-rememberings, so that we can stop falling back asleep again. And so that this is a continuing process until, as he said in that previous quote, it becomes permanent. And I think Gurdjieff says that if we can get 200 people doing this properly, permanently, bringing their real I out, the world can be saved, and so can humanity. And they can hopefully guide and lead everybody else to develop themselves. So I'm going to, I just quickly go and get different books. I forgot that I wanted to do this. So I'm doing this from Margaret Anderson's books now. And she's talking with Jane Heap, one of Gurdjieff's students who went on to become like a teacher of the work. So Margaret Anderson was talking to Jane Heap, and Jane Heap said to her, self-observation is conscious suffering. Self-observation is the hardest of all things to do. It's the effort that counts, the remembering to do it. And there was a question, but how do you do it? By self-control? And Jane Heap replies, no, not self-control. That uses up energy. Self-observation saves energy. And one of the important things about this work is we don't want to be wasting energy. Energy is vital. We want to convert it into the finer vibrations so that we've got the real energy coming down. You want to feel the higher vibrations coming to us. But by wasting energy, we're tiring ourselves out, and we're also not connecting to the higher vibrations. Which is why concentration and conscious efforts is very important. And as you were saying earlier in them quotes, conscientiously, we're doing this conscientiously. And I'm just going to do this other book by Kenneth Walker. I don't know if any of you've read any of Kenneth Walker's books. I highly recommend them. I think they're wonderful writings about being with Ouspensky, working with Gurdjieff. I think his books are brilliant. A bit hard to get, I think, in some places. So Kenneth Walker says, man was only very rarely aware of himself. He spent almost the whole of his time in a state that differed very little from that in which he passed his nights, waking sleep. Make an experiment. Look at a watch and try to be aware of yourself all the time you are looking at it. Say to yourself, I am looking at this watch, and make an effort to feel yourself sitting there, gazing at your watch and following the second hand as it moves around. And I talked about the watch, one in the self-remembering. So good experiment. I went and looked for this so that I could make sure I got it all correct, the quotes. All the time, keep up the feeling of I. Maintain your awareness of your existence in that room and see how long you are able to continue doing this. You'll find that you will not manage to maintain self-consciousness for more than about 2 minutes. And if you repeat the experiment soon afterwards, it will not last even as long as this. So the more you try it, the harder it gets to keep going. And Kenneth Walker continues, when one observes oneself, all that one does is to turn the attention inwards and become a spectator of all one's activities. One registers everything instead of allowing it to pass unnoticed. One was to look at oneself as though looking at another person, noting without comment how he moved, thought, and felt. And then I'm going to finish with a C.S. Knott quote, which sounds a bit depressing, but maybe it's a way of making you think, right, okay, I can do this. I'm going to go up from nothing to the highest. So Knott writes, we find it difficult to look at ourselves, for we are afraid that we may see something bad. And if by accident we do look deep down, we see our own nothingness. So I wish you all well with becoming aware, awake, and observing yourself. And if you do see your nothingness, remember from 0, the only way is up. So blessed be to all of you. And until next time, take care, everybody. Peace. Thanks for watching.